Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Pantheon Plus as we are continuing our run of Christmas episodes of various television shows. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. Brian, you can also find me on The Hive as well, because who knows how long Twitter is going to exist. So you can also find me on Hive at JeromeC1985 as well. My colleague and co-host, as always, is Brian. You can find him on Twitter at BrianTheBrain. And Brian, this week we will be taking a look at some modern sitcoms. 2 weeks ago, we looked at some classic sitcoms. Very, very exciting for us to now discuss. I'm very, very excited for us to discuss these episodes because, Brian, what we are going to do is we are going to be doing something that has never been done before. We're going to talk about The Office, Community, and Ted Lasso online, something nobody has ever done, right?
To my knowledge, I guess, but I'm sure there's been others out there. But the main thing is that ties these things together are the Christmas episodes. So we're definitely going to take a look at some Christmassy themes. We're going to take a look at Michael Scott being a really, really vindictive dick. But that's season 2, Mike. That's kind of where Michael Scott was at in season 2. We'll talk about that. But watching that Community episode made me realize, like, I think I know why I don't watch Community. But we'll get to that in a sec.
Interesting. So we are going to start with The Office. For me, this is not only one of the best Christmas episodes of all time, but this is one of the best episodes of The Office, period. Of course, entitled Christmas Party, airing on December the 6th, 2005. After a very rough first season, The Office was really finding itself in season 2. You mentioned the fact that Michael is a dick. Yes, he is a dick, but incredibly, this is a toned-down version of Michael Scott when compared to season 1 when he was even worse. So the premise of this episode is that there is going to be an office Christmas party. And Brian, I don't know about you, but the idea of office Christmas parties in a corporate environment seems like the complete opposite of anything that I would want to do. And quite honestly, Brian, I'll say this. It is mentioned that there should be no alcohol at this party. And I'll be honest, in terms of if you want to get me at the office party, alcohol would be the only way to actually get me to attend. But there is going to be a Secret Santa. Jim has a crush on Pam. They're kind of doing a will they or won't they that kind of took place over the first few seasons and is a staple of so many sitcoms of this era. And has started, I think Cheers is really the first one to do this, but of course Friends has done it and so many other sitcoms have. And this is another in a long line of them as they tease the Jim and Pam romance for a few seasons until they finally got together and eventually married in season 6. There's a party planning committee. We find out that Michael has gotten a $3,000 bonus and has gotten a clearly inappropriate gift for his Secret Santa. And that's kind of the premise of the show. And by this point, I think, Brian, a lot of the characters just feel a lot more solidified. I think if we were discussing a season 1 episode, I think there would be a lot of inconsistency. But it definitely feels like the show has found its groove. And I think that's what makes this episode so good.
Yeah, season 2 for me was always the season that was like, like if you really want to start The Office, I wouldn't even recommend watching season 1, to be honest. I would just start with season 2. I've told this to people before, like, especially like in my Blockbuster days back when it was like, coming out season 2, season 3, like yearly, and we would get the new episodes. A lot of people were renting them. Like, these were a big rental deal before even streaming The Office DVDs. And I was on board from the start, except season 1, because I watched kind of season 1 on TV, and I was like, I don't know if this is like for me. And then my buddy was like, no, just put on season 2 and go from there. And just like I did, and I just kind of did a reset for the show. And ever since then, man, season 2 onward, I was just hooked. And even like when it's replayed on TBS or whatever, I still watch it. But to me, this episode sticks out the most because my cousin, like I have a lot of cousins, like a big family. You have a lot of cousins, and we're all in our 30s and 40s now. So we're doing these gift exchanges, and every year we're kind of like either stepping it up or trying to make it funnier. Like one of the gifts 2 years ago was like a bachelor gift. It was like a bottle of alcohol and a ton of condoms. And that everyone kept like stealing it, and you know what I mean? Like, so I know what it's like to lose a gift and stealing a gift and ending up with like a wall clock or something like that at the end. They're just like, okay, I could have got the bottle of alcohol in the condoms, but I ended up with a fucking wall clock. So I know how it feels. And if you if you have the balls to go and say Secret Santa when there was no planned Secret, I mean, to do Secret Santa White Elephant and not do like the White Elephant, I mean, you know what I mean? Like throw it out of all of nowhere. It's bad. It's bad because this is going to cause problems. And yeah, it's very shitty because you buy gifts specifically for certain people, and then all of a sudden this white elephant goes out the window when people are stealing the gifts. So it's chaos. And for that 10-minute segment in the episode, I think it was like just 10 minutes of them exchanging the gifts. It was like super super awkward but hilarious and just like cringy, but like you couldn't help but watch it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the appeal of Michael Scott around this era of The Office before he comes. He kind of has this evolutionary change in character arc, but around this time in season 2, he's still very selfish and clearly like the $3,000 you mentioned came from the fact that they fired a guy. So what does that tell you?
Well, I think the transition that they have made is that Michael Scott, while still a dick, is competent in his job, and I think that is a huge change. And yes, he did receive the bonus for firing someone, but I think that is worth pointing out the fact that we do see Michael Scott being a lot more competent in terms of the workplace. So I think that's important. And I think the moral lesson, which I think we're jumping ahead, but the moral lesson, Brian, is don't do Secret Santa and White Elephant. Do one or the other. Like if you're gonna do White Elephant, then just do White Elephant, and it's fine because then it's kind of a lark and kind of a gag. But if you're doing Secret Santa, like you're clearly buying for somebody very specific. So don't do both. I think is
Yeah,
the
tell
ultimate
that to
moral
my
lesson.
cousins when they decided to combine both the last couple of years and just shit went out the door. So yeah, that's how I ended up with a fucking wall clock. So
Well, yeah. I mean, it is unfortunate, but I think it's one of those things where some families know what they're doing and some don't too. You've also got to take that into consideration. I think this episode is very common for The Office. Dwight's kind of being his usual prickly self, and at one point he gets to take charge of the gifts, and he does it in his usual way. I think my favorite element of The Office always was the fact that Dwight was a huge kiss ass and is somebody who clearly wanted to be running the office, but Michael didn't actually like him. So that was always an element that I really liked. The inappropriate gift that Michael gets is an iPod video, which in 2005 is really cool, and in 2022, I think some people would probably say, "What is an iPod?" So yeah, it's pretty funny in retrospect to think of like the value of an iPod video is just not there anymore. Like I don't even think they make them anymore. So that's pretty hilarious, pretty funny, and eventually Mike goes out, buys 15 bottles of vodka, and gets everybody drunk. And I would imagine this is something that you really enjoyed because you love it when characters are sitting around and getting drunk. That's why I assume you really also like the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special too, because there was some of that.
absolutely. Well, we can talk about that another time for our special episode coming out at the end of the year for our little crossover special we're having. But we'll talk about that then. But yeah, I have never. I mean, I've been to one or two like work Christmas parties. You know what I mean? When I worked at a small business, but then when I was working at the medical center that I was working at last year, there was a holiday party, and I was just like, nope, no, thank you. And I was right because like apparently the only people that showed up were like all the people that were over 50, and there was a few people under the age of 30 there. But I heard my coworker did get really, really, really drunk, and he was happy about that. So I guess they can serve alcohol at these parties, apparently. I guess as long as they're office hours, it's not during the hours of work. So I guess that was the loophole there. But yeah, man, and anytime you got a bunch of people coming together, getting drunk during the holidays, it's a good time. And not over the top drinking where you're just like getting smashed and hammered and everyone's throwing up, but um, scenes like this, you kind of reveal some more stuff hidden within the character that they're kind of like, a sober person would kind of like you just kind of hide or cover up. But when you're drunk, shit comes out. So that it adds to the fun, and then it kind of adds to that Pam and Jim kind of thing, because like they kind of reveal a little bit more about each other without even noticing. I feel, especially when they're drunk. But yeah, and just the fact that you can tell that it's cheap vodka because the bottles were plastic. I think that's a big clue. Anytime you get plastic bottles of vodka, you're in for a heavy, heavy burning time.
I mean, I guess it's better than glass, though. You don't want a bunch of glass being thrown around. I think
At
that's
least the vodka is smooth in that case.
so. Yes, things get pretty hilarious, as you would imagine. I love that Bob Vance introduces himself by always adding the Vance refrigeration. That is a
Always,
tremendous
every episode
running
he's in.
gag.
Every episode, even the one where him and Phyllis had sex in the bathroom.
We also get Angela. Angela's just very frustrated throughout this episode because she tried to plan a nice classy Christmas party, and it doesn't work out. So she ends up throwing ornaments against the wall, and I thought that was pretty funny. And they go to the bar afterwards. So a pretty great episode of television. Like, it's just, there's tons of great awkward character interactions, and I think this episode it's so completely different from Ted Lasso. Like, it's legitimate whiplash. I watched this and Ted Lasso and the Community episode like back to back to back, and like there is such a huge contrast from The Office to Ted Lasso. It's unbelievable that they're the same medium, because Ted Lasso is such a nice show, and The Office is just not.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not nice people, but overall, I think The Office is one of the greatest comedies of all time. Like I said, like I feel like this early era really like set you up for what's to come, especially like the storylines of season 2 and 3. I feel set up the whole arc for like the whole show, like specifically 2 and 3. So I never actually watched the last season because I have this thing where like I don't want to finish a show if I really like it, because once I watch the last episode, it feels like it's done, and I don't want to have that feeling. So
I mean,
purposely
I've heard the
watch
last 3 seasons are pretty rough anyway, and I'll be honest, Brian, I think season 2 and season 3 are unimpeachable, but I'm not sure this is one of the greatest sitcoms of all time.
I think for me it is, because like as soon as I watched this episode, like my Instagram feed got that algorithm, and when I I was going through the recommended posts or whatever, and half of them started being The Office and all these quotes and clips and stuff. So I don't know. I feel like it's still growing too, because like I said, syndication.
I mean, people love the show. I mean, like, freaking millennials just watch the show in perpetuity, which is great, but I don't know that makes the show like one of the best sitcoms of all time. Like, I compare this to like a Cheers or Friends or Simpsons, and like, I mean, yes, The Simpsons has had a lot of rough seasons and not so good episodes, but like The Simpsons also had like eight seasons that, I mean, there's literally like a 3 or 4 season run where like every episode would like be a Pantheon worthy episode of The Simpsons. And I don't think you ever get around. Like, I think you have a good season 2, a season 3. And then it starts to get rough when they did the expanded episodes, and then Michael Scott leaves, and I think it gets pretty rough. But that's a topic for a different time. The biggest Christmas trope that is observed, Brian, is they buy a tree that is too tall, and we've seen it in tons of movies and television shows. That's really the only trope that I noticed. Did you see any?
I mean, I think the whole idea of Secret Santa's become this like modern trope now, because like more people are working in offices and stuff like that, so that's more relatable. So I've kind of seen that in more Christmassy things, is that whole Secret Santa idea. Plus, it lends to like some good drama, and like like who got me this gift, and who really cares about me this much, and blah blah blah. So there's some good stories to tell within that trope. But then the big tree thing is like the first thing I thought of was National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and I'm sure there's other movies too, but that was the first one that I thought of, because that was the one that kind of like made fun of it, I think, the most in like popularity, where where the first tree they get is too big, and then they up and get another tree that he cuts in the backyard of his neighbor. We could talk about that another time, but that's what I think of. But speaking of Chevy Chase,
that would be a great transition, but we still we have to give some awards out, Brian.
Forgot about that.
So ranking the theme song, I would say this is a bop. I like the Office theme. I don't think it's Pantheon worthy.
I'm gonna say Pantheon, because it's so deep in my subconscious, and like the show's popularity has grown so much, but I feel like if you play that theme in like a bar, everyone is just gonna go dun 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 dun. See what I mean? It's like it's so catchy and memorable that I think it's just people's subconscious. It's already deep in there because it's been on TV so much, And a lot of casual people, I think, have at least watched one episode of The Office, or at least clips, because I feel like it's just kind of like, people just kind of like spread the word about it so much that you end up watching a clip of it on a GIF or something online.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the best line. Any memorable lines?
Yeah, for me, it was Dwight. And there's a lot of lines in this one, but this one stuck out the most where he goes, Yankee Swap is like Machiavelli meets Christmas. And I was like, God, that's a deep cut there, man. Because if you study Machiavelli, it's all about power and control of the masses and like psychology. So I kind of get what he was trying to say about like outsmarting the person when you really want the gift the most. I kind of felt that.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, and it's a very him thing to say as well, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, because we all know that Dwight is secretly trying to control everybody, but he's out to lunch. So
My favorite, it's kind of a twofer because it's not one line, but Michael asks, all right, now you're the expert. Is this enough to get 20 people plastered? This is what he asks of the clerk. And the clerk considers it for a moment and then says 15 bottles of vodka. Yeah, that should do it. Chef's kiss to that. That's really good stuff right there.
Give me some more time in a dream. Give me the hope to run out of steam. Somebody say it could be here, it could be wrong. I'm tired of getting again. I can't count the reasons I should stay. One by one, they are just fading away.
Let's talk about another very, very good episode of television. I'm not sure that this is top tier. Like, I would say The Office Christmas Party is like a 9.5 or a 10. And for me, like, this Community episode is definitely a step down. I'm very curious to know what your thoughts are because you are not somebody who has watched Community. I've seen every single episode of Community, including the final season that aired on Yahoo's streaming service, which, boy, oh boy, that was the thing, everyone. Yahoo really did have a streaming service, and Community's final season aired. I think this is a show. I think the first 3 seasons are really, really good. Season 4 is bad. I think seasons 5 and 6 not as good as the first 3 seasons, but I definitely think there are still some very, very good episodes. And the first season is kind of a different animal. Season 2 and season 3, things get really weird. And like at one point, I had marked down that we were going to do the season 2 episode, but it was a little too meta. There were a lot of inside jokes in season 2 that I'm not sure Brian would really understand. So that's why I decided to pick this episode because I think it's much easier to watch out of context. And I think it's much more, let's say, quote unquote, normal compared to a lot of other episodes of Community that we could have watched. So Brian, I want to know what your feelings were. I'm going to get into some of the plot details, but you mentioned that you did not see yourself as being a big Community fan. So why don't you explain that within the context of talking about this episode?
Okay, so for me, it's mainly the dialogue, and I feel like the dialogue is like going way too fast, whereas like The Office lets it kind of simmer and let you take in what he just said or what Michael just said. But in Community, it feels like they're spewing all these great lines, but then it's just like, whoa, I just heard like 5 great lines in like 5 seconds. Give me a second to slow down here. And then I had to rewind a couple times to kind of catch what the jokes were because I was like, holy shit, did Donald Glover just do a joke and then he did a joke and then Chevy Chase did a joke, but then they just went back to Joe McHale? So I was just like, okay, let me slow down a little bit here. And then I had to kind of get the pacing of what the show's writing is. So I enjoyed it. It's just too much going on at once with the dialogue. And I was like, slow it down, let it simmer. Let me absorb the joke first before you get to the next joke. And then there's like some insider jokes going on and then making fun of Chevy Chase for being old. So I got to get that. Overall, I think the cast is fine. It's just I wish you can kind of get behind the characters more right off the bat. Because my problem when I watched the first episode of Community, the debut episode when it premiered, was that I was just not rooting for anybody. Like, I don't want to see these people graduate community college. I don't want to see these people succeed. They're all assholes. And then I watched this episode and I'm like, okay, they're not exactly all assholes. Maybe it's just a vibe that Chevy Chase gives off sometimes, or Joe McHale. It's fine. Like, I get the premise, and I like the fact that they filmed it, you might not know this, but LA Community College in downtown LA, they use the exterior for that, and it makes sense because that's the closest they got. But I've been to some community colleges classes, and it does feel like it's just a bunch of 20, 30-year-old, 40-year-olds going through high school again. That's kind of that's the vibe, and at least the community gets that vibe when they have like these like shots of classrooms, and I'm like, wow, this looks like it's a middle school, and it's just like, no, that's just community college. But at the same time, it's like they really use clean sets, and I'm like, okay, this classroom is way too clean to be a community college in LA. You know what I mean? But that's just kind of like set dressing. You know what I mean? They can't make it look too grimy because it would be unappealing. Not like Taxi, but in terms of the characters, though, I do like it feels like they have a good chemistry, the cast together. I just wish they would just slow down a little bit and let me absorb some of the information of what's going on. But overall, I did enjoy it, and I did have a good line that I actually caught that I actually liked a lot, that I was able to laugh at a lot. So overall, I think this is a good episode in terms of like introducing the characters, because it kind of reveals like where everyone's at right now, and especially some of the characters who have been through a divorce, and this is their first Christmas since the divorce kind of thing. So there's some relatable stuff there. I just feel like I don't know, like it was just kind of weird that they were going through like this community college thing, but like they're still having bullies at school. Like, what the fuck? So I guess that's the joke of it all. It's like everyone's treating it like high school, which I get, and that's the joke. But did you notice the connection to National Lampoon's Vacation, the first movie?
I did not, and it's worth pointing out that Chevy Chase is the star of not only Vacation, but also European Vacation, Vegas Vacation, and probably most relevant for this conversation, Christmas Vacation. So the reference you are discussing was not to Christmas Vacation, but to the original Vacation, and I'm assuming it is the fact that Anthony Michael Hall is a guest star, right?
Oh, I marked out for that. I'm glad you didn't tell me that. And as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh my God, I see the connection they did here. And I was just laughing, but they didn't have an interaction together, which was kind of disappointing. And is he a regular?
No, this is Anthony Michael Hall's only episode.
Wow.
But it's a good one. I think he's very.
I mean, he
very
did a good job. He did a good job. It's just that I wished he interacted with Chevy Chase, but they kind of didn't do that. But
I mean, maybe he didn't want to interact with Chevy Chase, which is kind of accurate to how many of the community cast members felt by the end, because Chevy Chase is a raging asshole and nobody likes him.
A little bit of trivia for you. Chris Columbus was supposed to direct Christmas, or no, Harold Ramis was supposed to direct Christmas Vacation, but he walked off the set because of one man. Guess who?
Chevy Chase.
Exactly. There you go.
So Community, the premise is that it's a bunch of broken people that form a study group specifically for their Spanish class. And this is kind of a payoff to it because they are getting ready for the holidays, but they are also studying for the final exam for Spanish 101. All of them actually pass, and that's what's made clear at the end of the episode. But Brian, you mentioned having taken a few community colleges classes. I have taught at many a community college in multiple states. And I will say this, I think Community, I don't know if they nail the exact ambiance, but boy, in a lot of ways, this show feels like it is accurate to how community college feels. And that's really all I could say. Look, I am not sitting in the front of the classroom wearing a sombrero as trying to teach a Spanish class. Thankfully, I would never do that, but because I'm an English teacher. But yeah, I think that this really captures it really well. I think this is a great cast. I mean, you've got Joel McHale as Jeff Winger, you've got Jillian Jacobs as Britta, and like all of the characters are so specific. And I think the show is flawed in a lot of ways, but I really think they differentiated the characters a lot. And you mentioned kind of the pacing. The pacing is very fast, and I think that's why the show kind of struggled to find an audience, and it never became the hit that a show like The Office is. And I also think that's why, like, yes, I think there are a lot of people who are community fans, and yes, we are getting we are getting a community movie that's going to be on Peacock, but I don't think this has ever reached the heights of that. So I will tell you that I was very impressed with how the show got better and better with each episode. And again, I think it would be really interesting for you to watch seasons 2 and 3, just because I think the show, it becomes very different. Just like just like the seasons 2 and 3 of The Office become very different. But in terms of your enjoyment, we could not have watched a season 2 or 3 episode and have you absorb the context, because this episode is pretty cut and dry. Like they're Shirley wants to celebrate Christmas, but everybody is either agnostic or an atheist or Muslim or a Jehovah's Witness, so they don't celebrate holidays. There's that conflict there, but eventually, Shirley does not want anyone. She doesn't want any fighting, and she even explicitly tells Jeff that if he decides to fight, then he is not welcome at the Christmas party. But she changes her mind, and the study group they beat the bully's ass in the end. All pass Spanish, and they all get to enjoy their holiday party. This is a really good distillation of the dynamics of Community, and I give them a ton of credit for having this dynamic. I think the pilot is rough, but again, I think the show just gets better and better with each episode. And the fact that they have a foil to play off of in this episode in Anthony Michael Hall that kind of brings them together, I think that's where the show is at its best, is when they have somebody to unite against, because there is a lot of conflict. There's a lot of arguing among the characters, but when they have somebody to unite against, I think it works out really well. And I love the dynamic with Troy and Abed, played by Danny Pudi and Donald Glover, respectively. Their dynamic is really funny. I don't think you got a lot of that in this episode specifically, except for the credit scene. But if you were to sit down and binge watch, you would definitely, I think, appreciate the dynamic that those two have, because they're just really hilarious. And Pierce is really inappropriate, but in a world where Chevy Chase is not a raging asshole, I think people would look fondly at this as like a great late stage Chevy Chase performance and kind of a last gasp for his career. So it's just unfortunate that he's a raging asshole, because I think this is a very, very good role for him, and he's having, I don't know if he's having a blast, because I don't know if he's capable of being happy, but just what he gets to do, like, across the board. And the fact that, Joel McHale is kind of playing a Chevy Chase type in a lot of ways, it's perfect. I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I like their chemistry, like I mentioned. Little side note, so if you happen to recognize the plot of this episode, folks, and it happens to sound familiar, where a guy gets bullied during the middle of the day of school and has to fight the bully at 3 o'clock after school. There's a movie called 3 O'Clock High, everybody, and it's the exact plot, except it's just this kid, or not a kid, he's like in high school, but this nerd pisses off the bully. The bully's like, 3 o'clock, I'm going to beat your ass, and then they have a fight at the end. I haven't actually seen the whole movie. I've only seen clips online because I've heard of it, and then I watched the trailer. I was like, I don't need to watch the whole thing. I think I just watched all the best parts now. But it was just like an exact ripoff of that plot, which makes sense because, I mean, if they're already making fun of, like, the fact that community college is already like high school, and you want to have these high school drama shit going on in the background, that's a perfect way to mock it by doing the 3 O'Clock High plot, and then having Anthony Michael Hall come in his 50s and being the bully with a fake mustache. Yeah, I was laughing at that for sure, because that's kind of like the parody that I like, the kind of style of parody where you take this obscure movie that no one's heard of. Jerome's never even heard of it before, and I had to introduce him to him like before we recorded. And yeah, 3 O'Clock High came out at like 89, so, and it was like a flop, but people listed on their cult classic comedy lists, and I've heard that before. So there you go. If you want to see Richard Tyson before he was the bad guy in Kindergarten Cop, there you go. And he happens to look like Channing Tatum. So overall, I would say 7.5 on this episode, as a fresh guy coming in. But again, I had to rewind and catch up with the dialogue, because there was a lot of dialogue going on and a lot of jokes going on that just kind of went over my head because it was too fast.
I really love the song that Shirley sings towards the end, the PC version of Silent Night. I think that's pretty funny. In Community, they did write some songs. I don't think they're as known for it as other shows, but I think by virtue of the fact that they were airing at the same time as Glee, I think you just had a lot of musicals. And yeah, there's literally a Community Christmas episode later on that is a parody of Glee, so it's pretty funny. So kind of an early effort in terms of songs, but this was a very good one. And yeah, how would you rank this theme song? I would say it's a bop. I don't think this is like super memorable, but I think I think it's it's fine for the show.
It's a bop for sure. It's not like as memorable as catchy as the Office theme subconsciously, but I'm sure if I binged it, I would like hear the theme in my head over and over, and then reconsider maybe. But right now, it's just a bop. I actually was able to record like my favorite line of this, and it kind of happened really fast, but I got it, and it was agnostic, lazy man's atheist, and I was like, I had that
Yes.
exact conversation with people before, like we were talking about beliefs and stuff, and like agnostic atheism, and then one of my friends was like, God, it feels like agnostic is kind of like a lazy version of being an atheist. and then I don't know why, that was years ago we had this conversation, and then when I saw this episode, I was like, holy shit, I'm not the only one that had the exact same conversation. So I guess that's kind of like a thing that people treat agnostics as. I'm kind of like borderline agnostic atheist, so I don't know. I guess it kind of changes on the day, but I guess I'm lazy. So there you go.
So yeah, this episode aired December 10th, 2009, and there are many references to the fact that it's December 10th, and it's pretty funny and a little bit of a little meta, which they would only get more meta as the show wears on. So my best performance is Joe McHale, and he also has my best line. There's a point when Shirley says that she is disappointed in Jeff, and Jeff said, "We all know that's mom for angry." And that's a big old bullseye in that. Really, really like that one. So, that's best performance and best line. What do you got, Brian?
Well, that was my best line, the agnostic line. Best performance, I'll go with Joe McHale because he's kind of like the anchor and he holds everything together. And he takes the punches at the end. So there you go. And he seems to be the one that kind of brings everyone together and kind of brings them down to earth, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yes, I would say that he is, and that is a running theme of the show, is that Jeff is constantly the one that is kind of bringing them back into and trying to center them. So I mean, he is very much the beating heart of the show, I would say. For me, the main takeaway of this episode, the moral lesson is, Brian, it is okay to whoop ass in the name of friendship.
I guess for me, it's like if you're gonna have a Christmas party, don't make it all Catholic. Because that really
don't make it all
Christian.
Christian.
Okay, I thought she was doing the Catholic thing, but
because there are because
3 years.
I think I forget if she's Baptist or Methodist, but I do not believe that she is Catholic because Catholics celebrate Christmas and Methodists do and Baptists do. There are very specific groups that are hit upon in this episode that don't celebrate, including like Jehovah's Witnesses and Jews. I also liked when Annie said when Annie tells the baby Jesus that he was one of them. I also that was probably my second prize for best line.
For sure. I think that's all the categories, right? I think for me it's a 7.5. And let's talk about my new favorite show, Ted Lasso.
I mean, we have to talk about Ted Lasso, Carol of the Bells. The weirdest part of this episode, so there's two weird things about it. Number one, Ted Lasso season 2 was supposed to have 10 episodes, but at the last minute, Apple placed an order for 2 more episodes, one of which was a specific episode about Beard that is very bad. It's easily my least favorite. It's easily my least favorite episode of the entire series. And what is probably my favorite episode of the series, maybe Carol of the Bells, maybe it's a definite possibility.
There's a lot of great episodes. Let's just say that right now, because it's to me, even though this is not the best episode of the series for me, this is still the best Christmas themed episode I've seen of anything. So
it's a really good one. This aired August 13th, 2021. This is the newest episode that we are discussing, but it's amazing to me that this aired in August of all times. And I think because of that, I think it really snuck up on people. But I can imagine this is a part of the regular rotation for so many people in terms of when I sit down and watch Christmas episodes, I could definitely see people watching this year after year.
Because it's standalone. If you watch this like just this episode and not the whole show, it stands on its own because it kind of gives you a brief introduction to the characters at the beginning
Yeah.
of where we're at, and then it goes into the plot. So in theory, it kind of starts on like a movie more so than than the usual show does, because they don't really get into like the drama much of what's going on with the characters. Like you don't talk about.
I
I
mean, they
think at this
referenced
point,
they referenced the team a little bit, but it is very, very minimal.
like I think they didn't even mention Sam was like on the app at this point, right? Or was even on the app, the dating app. I can't remember, but they didn't
Yeah,
mention
and
any of
Nate
that stuff. Like,
Nate is also barely in the episode, which I had forgotten.
which is purposeful if you notice and think about it 2020, because they were he's set up to be the villain of the show, and he does this big villain turn. Spoiler alert, everybody. Nate the Great turns at the end, but at the beginning of this episode he gives Ted the picture of their first win where they took a picture together, and we never see Nate after that. So it kind of clues you in on what's going to happen. Like, why isn't he here? Why isn't he enjoying the party with the team? And they answer that question later on at the season finale when he turns on Ted. So I like that little setup. And at first, when you watch this episode in order, if you're watching it in order, you're not going to pick up on that. But if you watch the whole season 2 and then go back and watch this, you're like, oh shit, they really set up Nate to be the bad guy because he doesn't show up at the party at all. And he's the only one I think that doesn't show up at the party besides Jamie. But I don't know. Jamie might have been just partying with models at that point. But I thought that was a big clue as to what was to come.
Well, it's also worth pointing out. I mean, Roy is also not really there either. I mean, he's kind of doing his own thing. But essentially, in this episode, you have three main plot lines. So let's talk about the Ted one first. So Ted is going to be alone on Christmas, which that's almost kind of like a trope at this point. The idea of being alone on Christmas. So Ted is spending his time alone because his family is back in the United States, and he admits to buying a drone for his son only because he can't be there. So he is drinking alone. And what movie is he watching, Brian, for the third straight week? This is subtly telling you that you need to watch this movie, Brian.
It's a Wonderful Life. I get it. But
So,
which
yeah,
part was it? Which part was it specifically?
So it's not the part at the end when everybody's happy. This is the part when Jimmy Stewart's George Bailey is threatening to commit suicide. And so Ted is perhaps in a bit of a dark place after FaceTiming with his son, but eventually he is rescued by the owner of the team. And it's pretty amazing to think of just how quickly the dynamic changes between Rebecca and Ted. The fact that like the movie is like the TV show, this show in the first season is like Major League, and now they're besties. And like clearly they were teasing a romance, but boy, they certainly went in another direction, which we won't talk about here. But boy, oh boy, the watching this episode again, it is so surprising to me that they did not go in a romantic direction with these two, because it definitely feels like they're headed that way in watching this.
It just seems too easy. Like, that's what I thought too. But then I think at the end of the episode, the first time I watched this, I was like, I don't know if they're going to end up together now, because that seemed like it was too, like, easy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they could just easily go in that direction. But if you want to challenge yourself as a writer, the way they went, I think was a little better. But it still could happen season 3. But I don't see them as, like, becoming romantic. I see them as, like, a strong platonic relationship, which is good to see in movies and stuff like that, and TV, because we hardly ever get that. And it's always usually leading to romance on Christmas or whatever. But this case, it was all about the fact that Ted was alone. Rebecca just experienced her first Christmas last year alone post-divorce, so she's empathizing with Ted. So it creates this great, dynamic, and it's like a real human emotion dynamic. And she brings him along because she knows that he's alone, and brings him along in this gift exchange with kids. And those kids are super lucky, because I thought they were just getting 1 or 2 gifts, and shit, they got the whole bag, didn't they?
They certainly did get a bag, and so Ted gets to feel better about himself, and Rebecca, instead of partying with Daniel Craig and Rachel Weisz and Elton John, instead she is giving away gifts. So that's pretty amusing. Look, in my view, if you're going to go and see Daniel Craig at a Christmas party, he better be doing his Benoit Blanc impression. That's all I'm going to say.
Are you telling me that I need to watch Knives Out 1?
Brian, how have you not seen Knives Out?
I don't know. I watched the other one on HBO that came on, the Sam Rockwell one.
See how they run, which is
It was okay.
it's not great.
It was
Knives
okay.
Out is incredible. Glass Onion, I'm not going to spoil any aspect of Glass Onion. Glass Onion is one of probably is as we are recording this is my number 3 movie of the year.
Yeah, that's called the Batista effect. I'm just kidding.
I mean, look, my number 1 movie has been locked in since April. It's Everything Everywhere All at Once. My number 2 movie is RRR. So the fact that Knives Out is just behind those movies is not even an insult because those are 2 of the best movies. Two of the best movies that I've ever seen. So Glass Onion is in very good company. So yeah, definitely check that out. Anyway, the second plot line is we got a bit of Roy Kent using his potty mouth as always. We get he and Keely. They are with Roy's niece Phoebe, and Phoebe has bad breath. So they are trying to find a dentist to find out what's going on because Phoebe it's funny, Community and Ted Lasso had bully subplots in their Christmas episode, although I guess the Ted Lasso one is a bit more appropriate because they are literal children. So Phoebe and Roy and Keely, they knock door to door. Also, what makes this episode so different than a lot of the other Christmas episodes that we've discussed is this episode actually takes place on Christmas. So many of the episodes either take place beforehand, they take place December the 24th, but this episode actually takes place on Christmas Day proper because it is said they have an important match the next day for Boxing Day, which I guess is a big deal for the football. So that is an interesting dynamic that I wanted to point out. Something else I want to point out is the fact that they do eventually find a dentist. They get some medicine. Roy having to bribe the pharmacy worker. I don't know the dynamics of the UK in terms of like buying medicine and when pharmacies are open on Christmas. I don't necessarily have a clear understanding of that. So but the movie then becomes Love Actually because Phoebe writes a series of signs to her bully and basically she threatens him to stop bullying her. It's cuter than it sounds, I would say, but yeah, a very clearly direct homage to Love Actually.
And side note, it really teaches you about like if you have an allergy to cats and you have a cat, you have to take antihistamines, and I guess antihistamines really dry out your mouth, and that's what causes the bacteria to build up and smell worse than ever. Because at one point, and this is not my favorite line of the episode, I'm just going to point out this one line where Roy goes, "I've been in the locker room with men for 20 years. I can handle it." And then he nearly cries when he smells the breath. So that tells you a lot. And I don't know. It makes me afraid to take antihistamines now because I've never needed them. But God, if I ever need them, my breath is going to smell like shit.
Yeah, it's incredibly unfortunate. But yeah, Roy and Keely, they wanted to have a sexy Christmas, but instead they got to hang out with the niece instead, which is kind of a nice wholesome thing to do. Speaking of wholesome, the Higgins' house, Brian, this reminded me of Muppet Family Christmas. That's what immediately came to mind. Like, I think in some ways, even the actors, like, he's a little bit younger, but I could definitely see him, like, becoming the lead of the Fraggle Rock TV series. Like, it was just very amusing to me. I love, like, they introduced the surfboard. The surfboard becomes part of the kitchen table. The entire team shows up. One of them brings a really hot woman with them, and just the way that it's all played out for laughs. And yeah, it's very amusing, and it gets a lot of the players, some of whom don't have a lot of lines, involved. Sam, it's interesting. Sam is such an important part of this season, but so it's weird to me, like in this episode, how unimportant he is. And it's interesting how unimportant Sam is to the main thrust of this episode.
So this episode clearly reminded me of a lot of my Christmases at my aunt's house growing up, where it was just like I said, I have a large family. So if I have like 8 cousins, that means there's like that many aunts and uncles, that many friends of the family, that many friends of friends. So I'm used to just people showing up on Christmas Eve at 11 o'clock, coming at the front door of my aunt's house and go, "Hey, we brought food and blah, 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 and alcohol, and let's drink." And it's like, oh, shit, we got more people. So I know what that feeling is like, where it's just like a house full of people on Christmas Eve. You kind of barely know some of them, even though you're family, but they just keep showing up at the door because you have a large family. And I've experienced this. And it's quite the feeling, man, because it's just like, who are all these people? I'm related to half these people. But in this case, it's the team, which is really cool. And I love the idea that each person from the team, if they're from a different country, brought their own like homemade, food from their culture. So I thought, oh, that's a great little twist, man, because like that shows you like in the modern Christmas era of like if you're alone on Christmas or whatever, blah blah blah. But if you're on a team and you're invited to a party, like it brings people together, and that's essentially what this did. But it brought people together from all different cultures, and I thought that was the beautiful part of it all. Especially like even though the French guy brought the beautiful model with him, and the only reason he did was because the French believe it's good luck to have a beautiful woman on Christmas or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's great. And if you notice the little things too, like when Sam brought his dish from his country, right? He made it with chicken. But then when other people brought it too, like from his country as well, other food from his country, they're like, it's got goat. And he just was so happy the fact there was goat in it. That was like a kind of a cool moment, man, because that shows you it's like Sam's trying to adapt to like the UK version of Christmas, right? At this UK, family house. But all these people from different cultures, and especially his culture, are coming in as well, and they get food for him, so he feels like he's at home. So I thought that was a beautiful moment, like just that one little moment for Sam, like it's got goat. He was just so happy, and that's kind of like what Christmas is all about, just like making your friends who are not feeling or who are separated from their homeland or whatever, and just kind of make them feel like they're at home again during Christmas. I thought that was a great moment.
Yeah, I think this is just a really good episode. I would give this like an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. I mean, it's not the most plot heavy of episodes, but it's so completely different, like from The Office, and especially from the episodes that we talked about last week. Like we talked about freaking South Park and Futurama. Like this is definitely not that. This is a much more pleasant. This is the kind of episode that you could actually watch with your family and enjoy it. And it is definitely going to be a part of my regular Christmas rotation. So yeah, that's really good stuff. So very much appreciate that. So let's see. Anything else? Oh, the episode ends with Ted and Rebecca showing up, and Hannah Waddingham gets to break out the pipes as she sings.
Dude, she was incredible. I didn't know that she was a good singer until recently, and then I saw some of the posts. I think she sings in Hocus Pocus. I could be wrong on that.
She does not sing in Hocus Pocus, but
she probably should have.
She probably should have. It would have made the movie much better.
But
although
man,
it's weird. So here's my hot take. I actually like the Hocus Pocus sequel more than the original Hocus Pocus.
Well, I'll wait to watch that because I heard so many mixed things. But then when I heard Hannah Waddingham was in it, I was like, why didn't you advertise this as like from the start?
She's in the movie for like 5 minutes, so it's not really a thing.
To me, she's like the bigger star right now out of all those people in that movie. But that's just because I'm with the Ted Lasso.
See, I mean, Ted Lasso has made everybody in this show a big star.
Yeah, and I'm just so glad she was able to sing, and like you can tell that it's her because it does sound like her, and she's an actual great singer. So that was a great little way to tie that in. And I think she sings in her dad's funeral, right? Which is amazing too.
Yeah, I mean that might actually be the best episode of the best episode of Ted Lasso, is because I remember that one being really good.
Yeah, that's in my top 3. The other one that I really like a lot is when Jamie. Well, it's when they think that the locker room is haunted and they have to burn something personal in order to exorcise that demon or whatever that they're superstitious about. And then the fact that they were able to accept Jamie back in when he was like on the outs, that was like a beautiful kind of moment too. So Ted Lasso is all about, reflecting what, life, and it's not necessarily vulgar. Sometimes it gets a little vulgar, but it shows you what like the positive side of life, even though you're down kind of thing. And the fact that everything seems to be going against Ted Lasso, like the character in these 2 seasons. Like he's getting a divorce. He's on a team that no one wants him around, but he gets past it and kind of wins everyone over. So that's kind of the beauty of the show for me.
Yeah, I would say so. So I would say the biggest Christmas tropes. Santa Claus is real in the Ted Lasso universe because of course he is, I guess.
Sure. That's just like the Full House episode. Yeah, Ernest Saves Christmas and all that stuff. So, yeah, why not?
We also have the idea of the found family, which is very common. I mean, I think that's kind of a theme, the Office community and this, like, in addition to being modern sitcoms, but the idea of the found family, because, like, the Higginses are related, but none of our main characters are actually related. The best line is actually not said, but it's written down. It's Phoebe. However, unless you make amends, your stink will last forever. Chef's kiss. Great line. Love it.
Great line. But I went on a kind of a inside baseball kind of route. At one point, they talk about the movie once, and then Ted goes, I saw it once, twice, and I just laughed out loud because I don't think anyone except me and the people on that crew know what that movie is. Have you heard of that movie?
I feel like I have, but I definitely have not seen it.
So Once is about, it's kind of like shot almost like documentary style, but it's a fictional account of two Irish like street singers coming together and forming this like two-piece band, and they kind of fall in love, but like the music is unbelievably good, like a great like romantic kind of soundtrack. And it feels like the songs are kind of organic, like they make up on the fly, but even though like they wrote this ahead of time. So that's in connection to at the moment where they see the street band performing, which they hire later on for to perform at the end of the episode. But that kind of ties in with Once because Once was all about, street performer and great singers singing on the street and like striving for like, fame and kind of thing. So I highly recommend that movie. It came out in like 2007, 2008, I want to say, and they had this great Oscar moment. I think that's like the height of their careers. But I do remember Colin Farrell introducing, because he's Irish as well, so he's got up on stage like, God, I'm getting emotional saying this. That's what he said, and he's like, "Here's the band," or blah blah blah, and he introduced them on stage, and it was a great moment. But look that up. Once, great musical. It's one of the more unconventional musicals that I actually like. That's not like stage presence heavy. It's just more grounded and realistic.
So for me, the best performer is Hannah Waddingham. I don't think it's particularly close, if for no other reason than we get to hear her sing. I think that's a big reason why. And the moral lesson, Brian, is that you should never spend Christmas alone.
And don't be a bully, and especially if you're doing a gift exchange and you are the bully, and make yourself the bully within the note. Don't do that. Don't do that at all. That's fucked up, kids.
It is. All right, Brian, why don't you tell the people what we are going to be reviewing next week?
So we kind of built this up, and I kind of gave in. So we're going to review It's a Wonderful Life with our boy, James Stewart. Even though it's not my favorite of his performances, I still love, I don't know. I mean, I watched some of the clips, but I'll watch the whole thing next week. But I still love, Rope and Rear Window, but that's just me being a Hitchcock mark. But he is very, very involved in the scenes I'm in. Let's just say that it's not the 90-minute movie I thought it was. This movie's 2 hours and 10 minutes, so we'll go from there, because it's a long movie and it kind of drags a little bit, it seems. So we'll see.
So It's a Wonderful Life is on my list of 100 favorite movies of all time, and we were going to originally review something else, but I really want to review this because Brian has never seen it, and I will be very curious to have a conversation about it, because it is, I think, when people think of It's a Wonderful Life, I think it's different, man. Like, it's very different than I think people, when you actually sit down and watch it, the movie is just, it's different. And we're going to get into why next week. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.